Obviously, it's not George tonight. So we're going to go through the same routine. I got a couple of videos tonight. It's pretty much history. It's not really religion, but since we've been on the Revolutionary War theory and stuff, the 250 years, I think we're just going to go through that. And then if we want to do something different next week, let me know because George isn't going to be here again next week too. So my voice is kind of faded, so bear with me. Um, Announcements, I don't really have any announcements, so we'll let William. My two videos are about 15 minutes each long, so we'll get going. Let William.
Thank you. All right, good evening. So we're going to be starting with number 197, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. Oh, because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. I'll last. Oh, we weak and heavy laden, cumbered with a load of care. Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there. All right. Our second song is number 524. It is well with my soul. All right, come on. I should pick ones that are closer together. Oh well. Almost there. Yeah. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the joy of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well. with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. On the last. And Lord, haste the day when my face shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul.
Excuse me? No, no. Here we go.
Good afternoon, and thanks for stopping by Across the Fence. I'm Keith Silva. 250 years ago tomorrow, a ragtag bunch of so-called Green Mountain Boys stormed into a former French fort near the narrows of the southern end of Lake Champlain. And the rest, as they say, is history. You've no doubt seen this famous image of what this attack might have looked like, but the truth lies somewhere in between. On this auspicious day in Vermont and American history, we're going to unpack what went down in the early morning of May 10th in northern New York and its impact in Vermont and on American history with Across the Fence's resident historian, Howard Coffin. Howard, thank you for coming back to Across the Fence. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Nice to be here, Keith.
Good. Okay, so we were talking about this before we started talking. One of the most pivotal moments in American history, obviously, the raid on Fort Ticonderoga, and world history. This is really quite something that happens.
It's a major event in the history, of course, in the history of Vermont, but in the history of the aborting nation, and really in the history of the world.
Set the scene, Howard. This capture of Fort Ticonderoga happens early in the morning, early in the war for American independence. How early? What's happening in the American Revolution at this time?
Well, it's less than a month before that the revolution has begun. The British come out of Boston looking for supplies and weapons outside of Boston, and they go to Lexington and Concord, and they are met with resistance. There's fighting at both places, and that starts the war. But Ticonderoga is the first offensive action of the Revolutionary War. Now it's a real war.
Now it's a real war. Where on the map, so, Ticonderoga, obviously across the lake, as we said, this sort of narrow section of Lake Champlain. Where do the Vermonters gather before they go on this raid?
They gather on May 9th at Castletown. Castleton.
Yes, Castletown.
And when they get together, there's more than 200 of them, they find they have two commanders. They have Ethan Allen, of course, but Benedict Arnold shows up, and they both have some authorization to take Ticonderoga because the new nation needs artillery. And they know it's at Ticonderoga.
So how do they come together and Allen gets the assignment and actually goes?
They come together and they have a big argument. These are two strong minds, and it's settled by saying we will co-command. And so the two of them lead the attack on Ticonderoga.
And Ethan Allen, for maybe more than one reason, gets the credit and not Benedict Arnold.
That's true. Of course, Arnold is a wild fighter. Benedict Arnold is a military genius who was so valuable to the American cause early in the Revolution. We can't thank him enough.
Right, which is why becoming a traitor becomes such a big story,
Yes.
because he was so important. This is an attack at night. Not easy to pull off a night attack, no matter if you're SEAL Team 6 or a bunch of farmers.
Well, the whole bunch of them moves to the shore of the lake at Hans Cove on the Vermont side. They're about 3 miles above Ticonderoga. But when they get there, they only have 2 boats. They don't have enough boats. So only 83 of them cross, but they get across, move down the western shore, actually up because the lake flows north. And about 2 a.m. they bust into the fort. There's only 1 sentry. I don't think there was a shot fired. There's only some 50 British soldiers, and they're all asleep. And Allen goes racing up the steps to the commander's room, bangs on the door, and Captain Delaplace supposedly asks Allen, by what authority do you do this? And Allen says, he said, the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress. Although Allen's men said, he just said, come out of there, you damn British rat. But Ticonderoga is theirs well before the sun rises. It is theirs.
Now, one of the things is I've been to Fort Ticonderoga, as have you, as should anyone in our audience. Visit Fort Ticonderoga. It's a very interesting place. It's well preserved. They do a great job with the fort there. And also the King's Garden, which we've been to many times on Across the Fence. Whenever I hear the story of Ticonderoga, it sort of feels like, well, it wasn't like it was very well defended, and it's a bunch of pensioners sort of playing out their time in the army. You think it's more important than just, the ragtag bunch of, underdogs?
It's tremendously important. The day of the capture of Ticonderoga, May 10th, they send Seth Warner and a detachment up to Crown Point. They capture the fort up there. There's only about 5 British soldiers up there, but there's more cannon. They capture a total of more than 100 cannon at both forts. And those will be sent the coming winter over the snow to Boston to drive the British out of Boston, and the British will never get Boston again. Hugely important. But beyond that, Ticonderoga makes for the most important position on this waterway from the St. Lawrence to New York.
One of the most important waterways.
The British believe, probably quite rightly, that if they can cut off the New England states from the rest of the rebelling colonies, they can win the revolution. So they come in 76. They come south from Canada. Arnold is waiting with a fleet, and they have to build a fleet to counter that. They come down to Ticonderoga after they brush Arnold aside. In a naval battle, Winston Churchill says is the most important in the history of the British Empire.
Wow.
And they come to Ticonderoga, and there are 10,000 American soldiers, most of them on the Vermont side on Mount Independence that they fortified, and they turn around and go back north for the winter. But they come again.
You were a part of the 50th anniversary, I'm sorry, the 200th anniversary, 50 years ago, the 200th anniversary of this event. Tell me about that. 50 years ago, what were you doing?
Exciting. I was working for the Rutland Herald, but covering it that night for the Christian Science Monitor. I worked for the Monitor also, and we went in the night with Allen's people. We crossed on a ferry behind their rowboats, and we busted into Ticonderoga, 2 o'clock in the morning, and 6,000 people cheered our entry. It was wonderful. And the next morning, I went up to Crown Point and watched the sunrise. An incredible sunrise. What an incredible anniversary.
You said that you were in the press corps, who was, I guess nowadays you'd say you were embedded with the Green Mountain Boys.
Not quite.
Not quite, but
We were behind them.
200 years later. Was it, were any of descendants in the crowd?
Yes. Most of the reenactors were descendants of the Green Mountain Boys, and the fellow who played Alan was a descendant of Alan, yes. From 1777 now, the Battle of Hubbardton happens, the only revolutionary battle in Vermont. The British are moving south under John Burgoyne, and it's a hard go. But Burgoyne is convinced he'll at least reach Albany and split off those New Englanders. And then he makes a terrible mistake. He sends his detachment toward Bennington.
Uh-oh. I think I know what happens there.
Toward Bennington. His German soldiers go off toward Bennington, and they are met near the Vermont border by John Stark of New Hampshire and Seth Warner of Bennington. And on the 16th of August, a vicious battle, and the Americans triumph. Oh, do they ever.
You're making me think that the Revolutionary War, in many ways, once Ticonderoga is under the control of the colonies, the American colonies, the British are constantly trying to go back and trying to fix that problem. That it's a problem from when they come down from Canada through the battles on Lake Champlain.
It's their route of invasion to get back their colonies, and when they're moving south, they have to keep that supply corridor open. They're bringing supplies all the way down from Montreal. It's a constant problem. But by capturing Ticonderoga, the Americans delayed the British taking of Ticonderoga by 2 full years. And that changes the whole outcome of the Revolution. When Washington hears about Bennington, which part of that happened in Vermont now, don't let him tell you different. He basically says, I don't have to worry about Burgoyne again. Whoa! Because it's the Burgoyne's defeat that world history now says was the turning point of the Revolution, because the French then decide to come in on our side. We couldn't have won without them.
You were talking about, maybe this is what Alan said, maybe he didn't. They actually quote Alan in the film Lincoln that came out, which I know you want to call Stevens because you think Thaddeus Stevens is more important to Lincoln than Lincoln, but that's an argument for another day. What do you think the truth is? Is there truth in this? Is the truth just that they captured the fort and they did, and that was that?
It's so hugely important. Without the artillery, Washington is pretty well almost powerless. They need to get the British out of Boston. It's that key port.
Right.
And when the British see those cannons looking down on them from Dorchester Heights, they do get out of there. And then the delays, the strategic importance of Ticonderoga and Crown Point really can't be denied. And always remember, when you talk about Ticonderoga, those remarkable fortifications that were placed at what we call Mount Independence on the Vermont side. And that name goes back to colonial times. When the Americans were fortifying that peninsula, they named it Mount Independence. And it plays such a huge role in the Revolution.
Well, Howard, thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation. If you would like to hear Howard, you can visit the Vermont Humanities Council, or Howard says, look him up in the phone book, if phone books still exist. That brings us to the end of our program. My thanks to the crew behind the scenes here at WCX, who are always plotting and scheming. I'm Keith Silva. This is Across the Fence. We'll see you tomorrow.
History.com, and now Revolutionary War Rarities. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Revolutionary War Rarities, the podcast from the Sons of the American Revolution. My name is Jim Griffith, and with me today is Dr. Matt Kegel from Fort Ticonderoga. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Very happy.
So, our last episode was on April the 19th, April the 18th and 19th, Paul Revere's ride and the start of the American Revolution. So, why would we be here talking to you today? Well, let me tell you where here is, right? First of all, here is the monument at Dorchester Heights. Dorchester Heights became famous with the noble train of artillery. The noble train of artillery came from
Fort Ticonderoga.
Fort Ticonderoga. There's why we're talking about this now. So, talk to us about Fort Ticonderoga. I know that we know the importance of it. We're interested in some of the little-known things. I know that it was originally built by the French. So it wasn't built by the British. It wasn't built by the Americans. I know that it's kind of out in, kind of by itself on Fort Champlain, but very close to where, what is the name of the river, Lachute?
So the Lachute River, which is right below Fort Ticonderoga, is where Lake George in New York empties into Lake Champlain.
Okay.
So it's this critical point where either coming from Lake George or from the southern part of Lake Champlain, you begin a water passage to Canada.
But that river, my understanding is, by large boats don't really travel that river, do they?
No, the Lachute River has a very high fall. From Lake George, it drops rapidly into Lake Champlain. So you have to move boats overland. And Ticonderoga is one of these critical junctures where you have to move the boat overland in what is otherwise a clear water route all the way from New York City to the heart of Canada in the St. Lawrence River Valley.
Okay, very good, very good. So talk to us about Fort Ticonderoga. We know a few things.
Yep.
Tell us some things, tell us some additional things, maybe things we don't know.
Yeah, so I think being here in Dorchester Heights is important. In some ways, it's the end of the story, but the beginning of that story is at Fort Ticonderoga because the British penned up in Boston during the siege of Boston were basically unreachable by the Americans.
Right.
You know, they didn't circle the forces, but unless
We
you
didn't have
can-
the boats to circle.
You didn't have the boats, you don't have the guns. If you had the cannon, you can bombard Boston, and more importantly, you can bombard the seaways that allow the British to resupply Boston with their navy.
Very good.
So without the cannon, you're kind of stuck watching from around Boston, from heights like these, and Roxbury, Cambridge, and all that area. Ticonderoga, it was known, had the cannon. And Henry Knox justifiably gets the credit for bringing those cannon down to Boston over the winter of 1775,
How many
1776.
cannons? 59?
He brings a total of 59 cannons. Well, he leaves with 59 cannons. He gets here with 58. One of them fell through the ice in the Mohawk River and was never recovered.
Still don't.
Still don't know where it is.
Okay.
Down there somewhere.
Yeah.
One other one fell through on the journey, so it might have been 57 that he brought here, were it not for the citizens of Albany, New York, that came out to help haul this cannon out of the icy Hudson River. And in honor of that, they named this gun, one of the largest guns in his expedition, the Albany.
Now, there ought to be somebody, there should be a name in history somewhere of whoever it was that ended up having to swim to the ice and through icy water to the cannon to tie a rope up. Or
Well,
wrap a rope around
unfortunately,
it.
he didn't have to swim. Nobody had to swim down there. They knew this was a danger, crossing ice with massive
Put
guns.
a rope on it before.
They had long ropes connected to the sledges moving the cannon, with the teams of horses moving far ahead, and a teamster standing by with an axe or a hatchet, ready, if that gun started to crack through, to cut that rope. Because that gun, some of those guns weigh 3 tons or more.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they could easily pull the horses down with them.
Oh.
So not only do you protect the draft animals, you've got a rope then you could tie onto a stick or a log to mark the location of the gun and then use it to also bring that gun up if necessary. And that's what happens outside of Albany.
Okay.
But this, Knox gets the credit for this, justifiably so. He gets them to the American siege lines outside Boston. But the entire expedition to capture Ticonderoga that begins in late April and May of 1775 was for precisely that reason of getting artillery. And one of the exchanges that initiates this all is, of course, as you know and you've probably been talking about, there are people from all across New England mobilizing to come to Boston. And one of the people who is headed up to the siege lines outside of Boston is a Connecticut captain named Benedict Arnold. Now, Benedict Arnold meets a Connecticut officer on his way back to Hartford, General Samuel Holden Parsons. And they confer, and Arnold mentions, I know there's a lot of guns at Ticonderoga. Now, Parsons goes back to Hartford, gets some assemblyman friends of his, some other notable Connecticut figures, and say, hey, we need to find a way to get these cannon to the siege lines in Boston. And they are able to pull some money from the public treasury. They do this without the knowledge of the Connecticut Assembly, and they send this secret expedition on the road up to Ticonderoga. At the same time, Benedict Arnold heads not back to Connecticut, but up to the siege lines in Boston, approaches the Massachusetts Committee of Safety saying, hey, I know there's a bunch of cannon at Ticonderoga, and he's able to get the Massachusetts officials to give him a colonel's commission with command to raise a regiment of men to head to Ticonderoga, to seize the fortress, to get the cannon, to break the siege of Boston.
So that's where Benedict Arnold thinks he's in control of this thing until he meets up with Ethan Allen.
Well, Ethan Allen gets basically brought on board by this Connecticut mission that's on the way.
Okay.
And Benedict Arnold sets off on his own. So there are two simultaneous missions to capture Ticonderoga, moving through the countryside of Massachusetts and up into the New Hampshire Grants, what is today Vermont. The Connecticut Committee, they get Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys, this kind of paramilitary band that had been fighting New York's control of their region. They're armed, they're more or less organized, they're ready to go into action. And when Arnold links up, because he links up in Castleton, Vermont with the Connecticut expedition, and he says, no, I should be in charge. I have this commission from Massachusetts. And there's a lot of disagreement. Both Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold are very big egos.
Yeah.
And eventually it's determined, we're at the 11th hour, that they will share command of the assault. And if that sounds like a bad idea, it is.
It is, yes.
And they are able to share that command long enough to get in, to capture the fort, and then immediately their relationship starts to break down. And they have to figure out, how are you going to get the guns to Massachusetts, where they're needed. And on top of that, remember, there is a Massachusetts expedition, which has Benedict Arnold but not a lot of men, but sanctioned from their revolutionary government. You've got a Connecticut expedition without the sanction of the government, but with money and with all the men. But you've attacked a fort. You've captured a British military installation in yet a third province, New York, which is only just then beginning to set up its Revolutionary Provincial Congress. So there's these overlapping authorities of who's in charge and who's going to get the work done. And they don't necessarily talk to each other. Allen and Arnold are butting heads this whole time. To his credit, though, Arnold does begin to move artillery out of the ruins of Crown Point, just to the north of Ticonderoga itself, move them south over Lake George to get them ready to go to Boston. But by the end of June, Arnold leaves the theater over a dispute over who's in charge, because Connecticut takes over the authority of the military bases there, and so he's gone, and the work languishes that summer. And then, of course, by the end of summer, you get the American invasion of Canada, which is launched.
So is this a time where Benedict Arnold feels like his valor was challenged on?
I think he was unwilling to be superseded. He felt that he had been there, he had been doing the work, and he had been. He's been launching, or at least negotiating diplomatically with native tribes about whose side they're going to be on. He's sending scouting parties out. He raids up into Canada, seizing the only British vessel on Lake Champlain. So he's doing this enormous amount of work, and I think he felt that he should be given the task of leading this, to fruition ultimately.
Sure.
And when Connecticut sends a regiment and a colonel there, and they say, well, he's in command now, Arnold is having none of it.
Wow. Well, incredibly interesting stuff. I think there's a whole lot more about Fort Ticonderoga that we need to get to. We don't have a lot of time on this particular episode to do that, but I would like for you to come back. Now, we probably won't come back here, right? And just for everybody watching, once again, this is the Dorchester Heights Monument that is a monument to that noble train of artillery that was set up, and it would have been facing Boston, which is actually on the other side. So Boston's on the other side of this hill. There's clearly some, if you can't tell on video right now, there's clearly some construction going on, so they've got the park closed. We couldn't get into it. But you still get a good sign of a good view of the monument from here. And it is quite windy up here because we are on Dorchester Heights.
On the Heights, yeah. This will look pretty good when we get to the 250th of Evacuation Day next March.
There you go. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to shoot up here, because it made all the sense in the world that we have talked about the start of the American Revolution, which starts the siege of Boston. You play a role with Evacuation Day
Absolutely.
of Boston, which is the British pulling out of Boston, evacuating Boston,
and it comes back into American hands at that point. Yeah, once you get those cannon that have come down from the north from Ticonderoga and the points around there, now the Americans have the firepower to reach Boston, to reach the British shipping, and the jig is up, as it were.
Very good. All right, tell us a little bit. You got an event coming up on May the 10th, which is the 250th anniversary of the capture of Fort Ticonderoga. Tell us a little bit about that.
Our no quarter event weekend actually stretches May 9th through 11th, encompassing the 250th anniversary of the capture on May 10th. We are going to be recreating that in the evening, a special event to the scale of the original capture. If you come Friday and Saturday, it's still a British fort, it's still in British hands. If you come on Sunday, it's been taken, and it'll be in American hands, and you'll see that switch. Visitors, if they come to our site, they get 2 days for the price of one admission, so you can see both sides of Fort Ticonderoga in British and American hands. We'll have the British troops there. Over the days preceding, we have roughly 80
There we go. Tremendous amount of history around this area that I did not pay attention to in high school. Of course, that was 50 years ago. So that's, but if you guys, I'll get the lights. If you guys want to continue with this next week, that's fine, or we can do something else. That's I can find a couple more videos. So that's so much history around here. You got Saratoga. It's just tons of history. So, but I was thinking today, excuse me, this narration took place last year, so that did not take place this year. So that's explains that. Time goes by so fast. I was thinking today that just the blink of an eye, time just goes so fast. That's 250 years. And 25 years, towers came down. It seemed like yesterday. Just unbelievable. The time just marches right on. We'll go into prayer request. I don't know if you guys